as time goes on. But this wasn't always the case. For several decades, they were one of the biggest fads in restaurant and live entertainment history. Without a doubt, the two most iconic that led to this phenomenon was Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater and Showbiz Pizza Place. But there's more to both restaurants than meets the eye, and the story behind each franchise is full of unexpected origins, drama, betrayal, and a lot of unintentionally horrific animatronics. So let's go back to a much simpler and stranger time with the rise and fall of Showbiz Pizza Place and Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater. The story begins in a very unlikely time and place in history, with a college freshman by the name of Nolan Bushnell at the University of Utah in the 1960s. You see, Bushnell was pursuing a degree in electrical engineering, and like most universities in the 60s, the college's computer department had a computer game called Space War. It was quite literally the world's first video game, and he found himself absolutely captivated by this innovative piece of technology. But it's at a local amusement park where things really began to take shape. As to put himself through college, in the summers he worked as a ride operator. He eventually worked his way up to manager of the games department, where he oversaw the Midway arcade games. Now, it may seem like a strange analogy, but much like the delicious combination of chocolate and peanut butter that led to the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, it was the amalgamation of these theme park arcade games and the college's Space War computer game that led to his brilliant idea: video game arcades. He then set forth on making this vision a reality, in which he eventually co-founded the entertainment company CHESSE to produce the first arcade video game in history, Computer Space. Unfortunately, this didn't take the world by storm as he anticipated, more than likely due to the game's complexity and steep learning curve. So he changed the name of his company to Atari, and in 1972 debuted Pong, but this time the results were a bit more optimistic.
Home video games have been a success from the moment a company called Atari launched this basic game, Pong. They're selling like crazy, 300,000 last year, this year 3 million.
The massive success of Pong was the spark that ignited the video game arcade fire, and quickly became one of the fastest growing industries in the country. But despite seeing an avalanche of profits from Pong and the games that followed, Bushnell soon realized the real money wasn't in selling the machines, it was securing locations to operate them. The problem was he wanted to avoid competing with the arcades, not to mention the owners he was selling his systems to. So he came up with the idea of a video game arcade using food as a support structure. This would allow him to avoid direct and undesirable video games, not to mention the owners he was selling his systems to. So he came up with the idea of a video game arcade using food as a support structure. This would allow him to avoid direct and undesirable competition, and potentially build a brand new franchise of his own. Now, much like the chocolate peanut butter analogy, there were a number of separate inspirations that, when put together, proved to be the perfect combination for this arcade restaurant hybrid. First was realizing that pizza was by far the easiest type of food to, as he put it, not screw up, so Pizza Parlor seemed like the perfect venue. Then upon visiting a pizza and organ pipes restaurant, which as strange as it sounds was a huge fad in the 60s and 70s, he saw there was a demand for live entertainment to go along with the pizza. Another source of inspiration came from a trip to Disneyland with his daughters, where by sheer coincidence he had applied for a job as an Imagineer straight out of college. But since the company rarely hired recent college graduates, he was repeatedly turned down for the position. Anyway, he was especially impressed with Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, which also by sheer coincidence was initially going to be an animatronic dinner show. The way he saw it, animatronics would be a fantastic way to entertain patrons as they dined, and he just so happened to have the engineers at his fingertips to figure out a way to go about doing it. The final piece of the pizza puzzle was Country Bear Jamboree, as apparently he was influenced by its wry humor, catchy musical numbers, and wide cast of lovable characters. Even better was how the show appealed to both children and parents. But the Disney theme park inspirations didn't end there, as Bushnell also envisioned the Pizza Parlor arcade with an iconic mascot in the same vein as Mickey Mouse.
Can we count on you?
You can count on me.
Can we count on you?
You can count on me.
But a coyote, and the title of the restaurant was going to be Coyote Pizza. Bushnell even purchased what he thought was a coyote costume from an IAAPA trade show, or International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. However, once the costume was sent back to Atari, they realized it was actually a rat. So it seems he decided to embrace the obvious similarities to Mickey Mouse, as the character was then given the name of Rick Rat, or Ricky Rat, with the title of the restaurant also changed to Ricky Rat's Pizza Time Theater. But Atari's PR agency felt having the word rad in the title of a restaurant probably wasn't the best idea. So the mascot and restaurant was given a new title, the Big Cheese's Pizza Time Theater. Unfortunately, the Marriott hotel chain, for whatever reason, already had a trademark on the name The Big Cheese. So the creative team put their heads together and came up with the name Chuck E. Cheese for the mascot, and the restaurant became Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater. But the cigar-smoking rat would also be joined by a handful of other characters, and together they would be known as the Pizza Time Players.
Now, if you're a parent and you've got some kids at home, I think you better pay attention to this story because before too long, Chuck E. Cheese and his Pizza Time Theater will be a very intimate feature in your...
I wanna be where the
1977, the very first Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater made its debut in San Jose, California. And while the food itself was criticized as somewhat mediocre, its Atari-centric video game arcade proved to be just as big of a draw as Bushnell had predicted. Top that off with the unique entertainment offerings by way of animatronic performers, and the restaurant was a huge hit with families. So it should come as no surprise that Noah and Bushnell wanted to expand ASAP. But there was just one thing in the way: Warner Communications. You see, just a year prior, Bushnell had sold Atari to Warner Communications for $28 million. In addition to the sale itself, one of his stipulations was that Warner fully fund one Chuck E. Cheese restaurant, which they did, but they simply had no interest in building another. This was a major problem because they legally owned all the intellectual property, such as characters, logos, names, and everything in between. So Bushnell was forced to buy the restaurant and conceptual rights from Warner for $500,000, or just over $2 million today. He then established Pizza Time Theater, Inc., and once again set forth on making his vision a reality.
The company's ultimate aim is to create a cutesy fantasy world in every neighborhood, to bring a mini Disneyland to your doorstep, and of course, to help your children spend a lot more of your money. Dolly Dimples, the singing hippopotamus, is powered by a computer system capable of handling 450 instructions per second. Dolly has a repertoire of more than 20 medleys and a bosom that rises and falls with compressed air.
The second Chuck E. Cheese restaurant opened just a year later, which utilized a former grocery store and was 4 times the size of the first location, making it the largest pizza parlor in the country. New additions included Dolly Dimples, the piano-playing hippo, which, quick fun fact, was intended to be for adults due to her somewhat risque dialogue and, bouncing bosom. To deter kids from entering, they even made a sign with the words, "especially for mom and dad." However, ultimately it was never posted, and she often entertained children of all ages. The game room was also expanded to become the Fantasy Forest Game Preserve, featuring virtually every popular arcade video game on the market. There were also a number of changes to the Pizza Time Players, adding both new characters and altering the appearance of others.
The Pizza Time Theater proudly presents
Down by the old
not the new but the old,
stream.
not the river but the stream.
The second location also proved to be a major hit with families, and gave Bushnell the confidence to leave Atari and focus solely on his Pizza Time Theater restaurants. He would do this with the help of eager franchisees, and he soon began to add even more locations all over the country. By the end of the next year, there were almost 10 additional Chuck E. Cheese restaurants, and was on track to open 300 more by 1984, and 1,000 by the end of the decade. A major player of this massive expansion was to be Robert Brock, or Bob Brock, the president of Topeka Inn Management. You see, in the years prior, he had already amassed quite the fortune by franchising Holiday Inn locations all over the world, and was drawn to the prospect of getting a slice of the Pizza Time Theater profits. Don't worry, I'll keep the pizza puns to a bare minimum. So in 1979, Bob Brock signed a $200 million co-development contract with Noah Bushnell, and became an official partner of Pizza Time Theaters, Inc. To keep it simple, this gave him exclusive rights to franchise his own Chuck E. Cheese locations in 16 states all across the country. But as a way to supervise these restaurants, Brock formed a subdivision of Pizza Time Theaters within his own company, Pizza Showbiz. However, this unintentionally set the stage for turning what began as the beginning of a beautiful partnership into a bitter pizza parlor rivalry for the ages.
Aaron had the idea to use animated characters for advertising purposes, and Willie is the first to do so, and with no limit to his vocabulary.
He's got a computer inside. The computer selects from various numbers of messages which he is capable of producing. So it's pretty random. You never know what he's going to say next.
Enter the founder of creative engineering, Aaron Fector, a young inventor who specialized in mechanical figures. You see, beginning in 1977, he began showcasing his animatronics at the Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, the same trade show mentioned earlier. First were a number of standalone figures, such as Willie the Rabbit, Friendly Freddy, and Count Dracula. This led to animatronic ensembles, such as the Confederate Critter Show that was sold to Magic World, and the totally not a ripoff of Disney's Country Bear Jamboree, Bear Country Jubilee. Now, the totally animatronic ensembles, such as the Confederate Critter Show that was sold to Magic World, and the totally not a ripoff of Disney's Country Bear Jamboree, Bear Country Jubilee. Now, at one of these early trade shows, he was approached by Nolan Bushnell, the same year he purchased the coyote, but not really a coyote costume. As it turns out, Bushnell wanted to purchase Aaron Fector's animatronics for his in-development pizza parlor, but out of fear of Atari reverse engineering his creations and putting him out of business, he politely declined. At the next year's convention, Aaron Fector displayed even more elaborate animatronics, this time featuring a band/comedy ensemble known as the Wolfpack 5. The event was once again attended by Nolan Bushnell, who was even more impressed by what he saw, and once again made an offer to the young inventor. However, this time Bushnell wanted to purchase more than just Aaron Fector's animatronics, as he offered to buy his entire company as well, but Fector still had no interest in selling. Now, as an important side note, at some point Bushnell had spoken of Aaron Fector's animatronics to Bob Rock, but allegedly he downplayed their quality as cheap and subpar. So fast forward to 1979, as with Bob Rock's first Chuck E. Cheese restaurant only months away from opening, he flew to Orlando to meet with the young inventor for himself out of curiosity. Brock was then given a tour of creative engineering and was blown away by the quality of Fector's mechanical figures, expressing his opinion that they were far superior to the Pizza Time Theater animatronics. In fact, he had actually been fairly critical of the ones used by Chuck E. Cheese, and had expressed this to Nolan Bushnell when the two were negotiating. However, while Brock was assured they would dramatically improve going forward, even as his first restaurant was about to open, this had yet to happen and was growing concerned. So ultimately, Bob Brock decided Aaron Fector's animatronics were the future of pizza parlor stage show dining, and the two set forth to create their own franchise, Showbiz Pizza Place.
I bet that pizza tastes good.
You've never seen a place like Showbiz Pizza Place. We'll serve you a pizza second to none. So come for the pizza, stay for the fun.
The very first Showbiz Pizza Place opened its doors in Kansas City in March of 1980, and was actually the location that was supposed to be his first Chuck E. Cheese restaurant. However, at the last minute, he decided to make it the pilot store for his new venture, which is why it featured some rather suspicious-looking Chuck E. Cheese-related set decorations. But the spur-of-the-moment decision also unintentionally led to the restaurant's iconic characters and mascot. You see, while the plan was to create a host of brand new characters for Showbiz Pizza Place, the decision to utilize his Chuck E. Cheese location meant time was of the essence. So for the first location, Bob Rock chose to just go with whatever Aaron Fector's company already had on hand, which as fate would have it was the Wolfpack 5. But to make it at least somewhat unique, they made a few minor alterations to the show tapes and character designs. However, these short-term animatronic characters wound up being very popular, so the group would stay on as the foundation for future locations. This was the same case for the restaurant's mascot Billy Bob, as he was just a slightly redesigned character from the totally not a knockoff of Country Bear Jamboree, Bear Country Jubilee. Although it is worth mentioning that initially he was only a walk-around character, and not actually part of the stage show. The second Showbiz Pizza Place opened for business in August of 1980, and this was the one that solidified the restaurant into American pop culture in August of 1990. The split officially featured Billy Bob and his pal Looney Bird, Mitzi Mozzarella, Duke LaRue and Fats Geronimo, Beach Bear, along with Rolf de Rolf and Earl Schmurl.
We've got the finest showbiz, England's finest showbiz, electronic finest showbiz, Showbiz Pizza Place. We've got big kids finest showbiz, little kids finest showbiz, family finest showbiz, Showbiz Pizza Place. Share the fun, come on, share the fun at Showbiz Pizza Place.
Now at this point you're probably wondering, okay, so what happened to Bob Rock and Nolan Bushnell's massive Chuck E. Cheese expansion deal? Well, shortly after meeting Aaron Fechter, Nolan Bushnell received a call from Bob Brock, who demanded to be let out of his contract. When Bushnell refused, Brock decided to go ahead and start up Showbiz Pizza anyway. This led to a lawsuit from Chuck E. Cheese on the grounds of breach of contract and theft of trade secrets. Showbiz Pizza then filed a countersuit on the grounds of misrepresentation, claiming they were misled into believing that outside of the Disney parks, Chuck E. Cheese had the only suitable animatronic system. And thus the pizza parlor battle officially began, with both franchises constantly trying to one-up the other. In some cases, Pizza Time Theater and Showbiz Pizza purposely built new locations right next door to each other, forcing families to side with either Chuck E. Cheese and the Pizza Time Players or Billy Bob and the Rock-afire Explosion.
The elements here at Showbiz Pizza are
Players or Billy Bob and the Rock-afire Explosion.
The elements here at Showbiz Pizza are very similar to Pizza Time. Video games. The elements here at Showbiz Pizza are very similar to Pizza Time. Video games, kiddie rides, mechanical stage shows, and pizza. The big difference is in the sophistication of the animated figures. The movements are more lifelike and the songs aimed at a more adult audience. I really enjoyed the musical arrangements of Showbiz Pizza's Rock-afire Explosion and was captivated by the choreography. This is a slick performance by any standard.
While the lawsuit resumed in the background, additional Showbiz Pizza restaurants began popping up all over the country, and the production of animatronic Rock-afire shows also began to skyrocket. The technology behind the mechanical figures was also improved, which led to an average cost of $100,000 per restaurant, or just over $300,000 today. Confident of their future, Showbiz Pizza was also spending quite a bit of money on R&D, with the majority of funds going towards even more advanced second-generation animatronics. One of these was Uncle Clunk, who is capable of 32 different movements and was to be a major addition to the stage shows. There was also a far more advanced Mitzi Mozzarella in the works, as well as a second-generation Duke, who would have played the drums with far more realism, with the ultimate goal to update all of the characters by the 1990s. However, at the same time as Showbiz Pizza, their competition was also going through quite a few changes of their own.
Smile America, say Chuck E. Cheese. Smile America, say Chuck E. Cheese. Food and games and all kinds of creatures. All taste the Pizza Time Theater. Smile.
The Ferrero Rocher chocolate bar, crunchy hazelnut.
Trying to get copyrighted.
Of new attractions is new locations were popping up all across the US, and along with the addition of new attractions and video games, major updates were also made to the animatronics and stage shows. For starters, the original portrait-style presentation was completely abandoned and replaced with a far more impressive balcony variation. These newer completely animatronics and stage shows. For starters, the original portrait-style presentation was completely abandoned and replaced with a far more impressive balcony variation. These newer animatronics were known as Cyberamics and were meant to give the ones over at Showbiz Pizza a true run for their money. These more complex animated figures performed on balconies and featured a new set of comedy routines and song covers, although the basic concept was still the same. Many locations also saw the addition of new characters for the cabaret room, such as Artie Antlers, who was originally called Elton John, and BB Bubbles. But don't worry, Dolly Dimples and her bouncing bosom was left in a handful of the restaurants, which no doubt led to some poor child to grow up with a strange and unexplainable hippo fetish. There were also new pun-centric sideshows, such as the Beagles, who performed songs by the Beatles, and the Beach Bowsers, who played songs by the Beach Boys. Yet another addition was the King, a 9-foot-tall animatronic lion who sang Elvis Presley covers. In a select few locations, there was even a Michael Jackson variation, and at one point was known as Michael Katzen. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't briefly mention Cheesy Street, otherwise known as the Cheese Factory. It had a Disneyland-inspired facade, and inside was basically a funhouse. However, this was a bit of an unintentional nightmare for kids, as many wound up getting lost in the maze, which led to an urban legend of disappearing children. Another unintentionally horrific adventure was Mr. Munch's Magic Madhouse, which could be found quite literally under the balcony stage. Inside was also a maze, but supposedly contained panic-inducing strobe lighting, and was eventually closed due to, quote, poor conditions inside the tunnels. Now, if all these new additions seem a bit all over the place, you're not crazy, as this was done to make each restaurant unique, which also enticed patrons to visit different locations within the same city or state. So yeah, both Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza saw tremendous growth in the early 80s, and both expected to have over 1,000 locations before the end of the decade. But while the battle of the animatronic-centric pizza parlors was mainly between these two monolithic franchises, their rising popularity led to a slew of copycat locations.
Dining out is one of the fastest growing leisure activities of the 1980s, and I think we're getting a more and more sophisticated audience that expects good food, but they want to be entertained. And we want to entertain them and give them a place that's fun to come to, where they can spend the entire evening.
Just to name a few examples, there was Bullwinkle's Family Food and Fun, PJ Pizzazz's Family Fun, John Philip Tuba's, Sergeant Singer's Pizza Circus, and Gadget's Restaurant, featuring Sammy Sands and the Looney Tunes stage show. But wait, I'm not done. There was also the Magic Pizza, Fuzzy Wuzzy Wizard's Wonderland of Food and Fantasy, Razzmatazz Pizza Palace, Major Magic's All-Star Pizza Review, Fair Play Pizza Theater, Tex Critter's Pizza Jamboree, the Pizza Planet next to Denim World, Gigglebee's Robots Pizza and Games, Mark Twain's Riverboat Playhouse, Captain Andy's River Town, Captain's Carnival, Circus Playhouse Restaurant, Circus World Pizza Restaurant, Grand Prix Pizza Cabaret, Juster's Courtyard Playland, The Enchanted Castle, The Celebration Station, and last but not least, Dimes and Critters Pizza. So yeah, to say it was a fad is a bit of an understatement.
By the way, the entertainment by the Critter Band is free. So come to Dimes and Critters in the 5 Mile Shopping Center for a great value and a great time.
Now, it's important to mention that in 1982, the lawsuit between Pizza Time Theater and Showbiz Pizza finally came to a conclusion. Ultimately, the case was settled out of court, in which Showbiz Pizza agreed to pay close to $1 million in damages, as well as a percentage of their profits for the next 14 years. So for a time it seemed Pizza Time Theater came out ahead as the victor, but severe financial trouble was brewing for the company behind the scenes. You see, during Chuck E. Cheese's aggressive expansion, franchisees were allowed to go virtually unchecked with their spending and promotional campaign expenses. Another issue were the labor costs for upkeeping the animatronic shows, as they built up with each new location and were vastly underestimated. But more importantly, the appeal and novelty of these stage show-centric pizza parlors simply began to wear off, and the also aggressively expanding Showbiz Pizza Place only saturated the market even further. To put it simply, the opening of new locations was outpacing the need for new locations, too much supply and not nearly enough demand. These financial troubles were coming to a head in 1983, and they might have recovered if it hadn't also been the same year as the video game market crash. Now, it's a bit of an oversimplification of a complex topic, but for our purposes, the oversaturation of video game consoles led to a decline in video game arcade attendance, which was one of Chuck E. Cheese's major selling points. Another detriment was Atari's financial loss of $500 million, which all but destroyed the company, as keep in mind, they were the biggest supplier of video games to Pizza Time Theater. However, the Achilles heel of their downfall was Nolan Bushnell himself, as he'd invested much of the pizza profits into new ventures within the video game and tech industry. So when Chuck E. Cheese began hemorrhaging a combined total of $20 million every month, there was no cash to bail them out. This led to the resignation of founder Nolan Bushnell. In that March, Pizza Time Theater filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. But Showbiz Pizza was also suffering from many, if not all, the same problems as Chuck E. Cheese, as their once exponential growth just a few years earlier had also come to a screeching halt. The decline in business had also abruptly stopped the flow of money into R&D, with the second-generation, more advanced Showbiz animatronics cancelled midway in development. The only one to escape this fate was the terrifying, lovable Uncle Clonk, who actually did wind up debuting in a handful of locations. Unfortunately, this well-intentioned nightmare fuel wasn't all that well received, and this led to a ton of Uncle Clonks going unsold and unused. But Uncle Clonk wasn't the only victim, as Showbiz Pizza's abrupt expansion cancellation led to a massive surplus of Rockefeller animatronics and creative engineering with nowhere to go.
He's the funniest robot science ever made.
Hello? You're on the air with Uncle Clunk. Oh, I get it. You're doing your impression of a telephone ringing. What are you, some kind of nut? I'd say you were more some kind of fruit, actually.
Now, despite the decline of both pizza parlors, due to the lawsuit, Showbiz Pizza was the one still making payouts to Chuck E. Cheese. So in order to save the company, Showbiz Pizza set out to purchase the now bankrupt Chuck E. Cheese and absorb all their assets. The The merger led to Showbiz Pizza and Pizza Time Theaters to unify as a single entity, which in 1985 became Showbiz Pizza Time Theaters. It's also worth mentioning that, similar to Noah Bushnell, Bob Rock wound up stepping down from his position as president and CEO of Showbiz Pizza. As far as the restaurants themselves, they were more or less kept independent from each other, except when it came to the marketing, as Billy Bob and Chuck E. Cheese were now seen as pals and part of the same bizarre pizza parlor animal universe. Both franchises were also rebranded with new logos and simplified titles, now sharing the same color scheme and word font. Going even further, all the commercials and TV spots for both restaurants were made to be almost identical and interchangeable. Now, for a time, it did seem like both pizza parlors would be very completely scary. The acquisition, Showbiz Pizza no longer exclusive rights to the
forget to subscribe for more content. Don't forget to follow me. The links are all in the description. Tap the notification bell if you guys want to get notified every time I drop. Smash the like button, comment your favorite part, and share this with your friends. See you guys on the next video.